So I want to keep going. I'm going to go to love your enemies. And let me go, before I go to love your enemies, let me read the question. The question here is, does the Old Testament, and this is where we're going to conclude, does the Old Testament teach that we should hate our enemies? Does the Old Testament teach that? That's the question. Does the Old Testament say that we can hate our enemies? Can you find that anywhere in the Old Testament scriptures? Anyone? Do we find that anywhere in the Old Testament scriptures? And the answer to that question is an emphatic no. You're not told to hate your enemies, okay? You're not told to do that. And this is so important for groups like the so-called Black Hebrew Israelites to think, they'll read a passage, Jacob I love, Esau I hated. I had to add the extra there because you know how they do the reading on the street, okay? Have no idea what's happening there in Romans 9. Have no idea what's happening there. Obviously, referencing text back in Genesis. They have no idea what's being in view there, right? Because if we know how God did bless Esau, we realize that God did bless Esau, right? People need to study their Bibles more. All right, anyway. Let us consider this. And I'm going to read this and then the lesson is yours. Notice what it says here in the text. Jesus, who is not throwing the Old Testament law and saying, you know what? I got other plans. Who's revealing at the heart of what God was aiming for right here, says, you have heard it said, you shall love your neighbor and hate your enemy. Well, obviously they didn't get that from the scriptures, right? But I say to you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you, so that you may be sons of your Father who is in heaven. And I explained earlier, 46 is not about how you become a son. It's about demonstrating you are a son. Big difference. The imperative is based on the indicative. That is, the indicative, what you are, is the grounds for what you do, okay? For he makes the sun rise on the evil and on the good, and sends rain on the just and the unjust, okay? For if you love those who love you, listen up, so-called Black Hebrew Israelites, for if you love those who only love you, what reward do you have? Do not even the tax collectors do the same? If you greet only your brothers, what more are you doing than others? Do not even the Gentiles do the same? You, therefore, must be perfect as your heavenly Father is perfect. So the answer to the question emphatically is no. There's no teaching in the Old and consequently the New Testament about hating your enemies. And that's the point. You shall not take vengeance, nor bear any grudge against the sons of your people, but you shall love your neighbors as yourself. I am the Lord. And there's other passages that we could probably look at too, as well, on this point. I think that might be worth looking at. We could also look at, in regards to Exodus chapter 23, right? Exodus chapter 23. Let me pull it up. Exodus chapter 23, verse is it 23? Oh, it's actually Leviticus chapter 19, verse 17 through 18. You already pulled it up, so we're good there. And then also, let me see, Job, I believe Job chapter 31, verse 29. If I have rejoiced at the ruin of him who hated me, or exulted when evil overtook him, I have not let my mouth sin by asking for his life with a curse. See, even in Job, Job knew that was out of bounds to do as well. So we see here, and even in Job 31, this idea of seeking vengeance, right? And don't we see a lot of groups like that now? They're whole set on I'm going to get even, or their whole doctrine and rhetoric is about getting theirs and getting back, right? Really, and it demonstrates what does Jesus say back in Matthew 5? What you're demonstrating by doing that is that you're not sons of the Father. Consequently, that's the point. And those who seek to pray for their enemies, love their enemies, just like the Heavenly Father sends rain on the just and the unjust, we are demonstrating that we're imitators of our Heavenly Father. All right?